Okay, we're live now. Just one moment. I'll give it back to you. Okay, so your host.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you, Ben.
And
I
if you just hit
appreciate it.
record when you're ready.
I'll send you a quick email or a text when we're done and just say like it's been recorded into the ether.
Okay, and you can text me if you need anything.
All right, thanks, Ben.
Thank you. Bye.
Hello there. How are you?
Hi, Pamela. Nice to see your name pop up. I was very pleased to see that.
What I couldn't miss it. So I got a few things going on back here. I'm gonna mute myself as not to be disruptive, okay?
Understood. This is a meeting that typically, I don't know, in the past, we've only ever gotten like 7 or 8 people that have shown up and we're usually done within 45 minutes. But if there's anything that you learn from ours that you want to adopt or that we can learn from what you're doing, we're all in.
Thank you so much.
Hi, Ushma.
Hello, Daniela. Thanks for joining.
Sure, thank you for organizing.
If you don't mind, Daniela, I'm just going to make you co-host so that maybe you can help if there's like waiting rooms and things like that, that you can help sort out as things get going.
Yes, happy to help.
Thank you. Nice to see you, Tom.
Yeah, good to see you too. How's it going?
All right. So we've got 5 people, so this is about our typical census for a Students in Temporary Housing Committee meeting. But I'm guessing Iris will join in the next couple of minutes and then we can get started. And introducing you really quickly, this is Daniela. Daniela, this is Tom. Tom was on the CEC for last term.
Hi, Tom. Nice to meet you.
Hi, how are you, Daniel?
Excellent. And we've got Iris as well. So Ben came on earlier and had us streaming to YouTube, and then he told me to record to the cloud just for archival purposes. Hello, Iris. Nice to see you. All right. Okay, well, it is 7:01 on November 3rd. Welcome to the CECD2 Students in Temporary Housing Committee meeting, our first meeting of this term. Thank you all for coming. There's about 30 people signed up. Hopefully, we will have at least a couple more, but if not, it's always great to have people who are very much engaged on this topic. Now we have Pamela Stewart from CECD5 as well, who's a terrific colleague, and I think tuning in both to the parliamentary thing as well as this and a number of other things. So very glad to have whoever is here to join us in the effort of helping all of our D2 students. So thank you, Daniela, for helping with all of the waiting room stuff as we're getting started. And welcome to all of our new colleagues that are here to join. We're very happy that you are here to help us and put forward some effort towards the D2 students in temporary housing. So we are a small group. I'm hoping that everyone can use the chat responsibly if needed, and you're all able to unmute and turn your video on and off as well, since this is a nice small group. Iris, I don't actually know what your formal title is, and when I looked on LinkedIn, it just said you're an administrator with the NYC DOE. So here, I'm going to ask you to unmute, and then I'd love to give you a proper introduction.
Okay. I am the regional manager for students in temporary housing at the DOE. I cover districts 2 and 3. There are 2 other regional managers for districts 1 and 4 and 5 and 6. You're interested in district 2. Do you want me to talk about what's happening in district 2?
Yes, I just, with a very quick bit of framing remarks for anyone who hasn't met you before, Iris has a real passion for helping this subset of students within the DOE. And over the last 2 years, I've learned a lot from her, and she was willing to make time tonight to come and talk to us about kind of the current state, just some numbers, giving us a sense of things. And then maybe Iris, if you don't mind answering a couple of questions from all of us so that we can make sure to direct our efforts in the right way. So with that, Iris, please feel free.
Okay. We had 14 hotels in District 2 a year ago. We're now down to 9. I am told that as part of the initiative from the mayor, all the hotels are supposed to close. There is a 2% vacancy rate in DHS shelters. There aren't places for the families to go. I would say a year ago we had 1,500 and now we have about 7. I don't know whether or not the hotels will close. I'm told every week we're closing, we're not closing, we're closing, we're not closing. For example, the Stewart Hotel, which is on 7th Avenue and 31st, 32nd Street, they're down to about 15, 20 families. So I really believe they will close. But the Row Hotel on 42nd Street is still getting admissions. So I really, we punt is what we do. We feel like the hotels are not the best places for the families to live. They can't eat what they want. They can't cook. You're in one room all the time. It was a hellish existence last year on remote instruction. If you had more than one child in a room on a computer or on a laptop, on an iPad, it was very hard to concentrate. The numbers of kids attending schools plummeted. It was very, very difficult. So getting them into a tier 2 shelter would be wonderful. They are opening up tier 2 shelters in the outer boroughs. When I ask about transferring, District 2, this may be my own experience, has the best schools in New York City. And so if you are enrolled in a District 2 school and you get transferred, you're allowed to stay in the District 2 school. But when you get transferred, you are only allowed to pick the borough that you will live in, not the part of the city you want to be in. And you can't even pick Manhattan because there aren't that many shelters in Manhattan. And the bigger shelters are now opening up in the Bronx. A lot are opening up in Brooklyn. So our kids are traveling all over the place as they get transferred. And it's very, very difficult. I've had a lot of child abuse cases. I won't go into that. It's been a very rough year. And we're doing the best that we can. Busing has been, I'm not allowed to say this.
All right, so then don't. I don't want you to get in trouble because this is being
I can
recorded.
say a nightmare.
Yeah, but busing has been a nightmare.
Busing has been a nightmare. There aren't enough buses. There aren't enough bus drivers. And if you're 6 years old and you go to a school in the Bronx, it's a very long commute for a little kid on a train, and it's hard to get a bus. Enough said. Please ask questions before I go on too far.
No, I think that this is all fascinating. So I was trying to catch as you were saying, what's your current estimate on the number of students in D2 schools that are in temporary housing?
Okay, the schools I can't give you. I can only give you the shelters. I didn't do the numbers for the schools. I'm sure the numbers are higher because anybody that was enrolled in a D2 school while being in a District 2 shelter remained. They don't like to transfer because the school is so good. But we have about 700, 750 kids left. Last year, we had close to 1,600.
Right. Do you think that that is partly because they've left the city?
Oh, I would say 1/4 of the families that were living in shelter a year ago left the city. And there has been a real effort to get families into permanent housing. They lifted FEPS, they increased the money for FEPS. People are moving out in record time. So that's a good thing, but they're not moving into Manhattan. They're moving into the outer boroughs.
Okay. And so you said that there's now how many shelters? Well, sorry, let me ask you a different question.
We have right now, I think I've got 9 shelters left. Okay. I mean, I'd have to check my list. I think by the end of December, and this is my own opinion, this is not from DHS, I think I'll have about 3 hotels left because it will be hard to place.
Right. So of the shelters that are existent in the D2 general area, how many of them are formatted for families to be able to live there?
They're all families.
They're all families, okay.
All the shelters I cover are family shelters. They're not men's shelters. We've had shelters in District 2 that have been converted to men's shelters. They wanted to do that with the Travel Inn. The owner of the Travel Inn had a difficult time of it. The Travel Inn is still open and is still getting new families. DHS typically, when they're closing a shelter, stops that shelter from having new admissions. So that's how I can tell that they're slated to close, because they don't really tell me, oh, we're going to close this. And
Right.
Travel Inn is still getting, the Row is still getting. I don't think Children's Rescue Fund is in your catchment area. That's a freestanding shelter on 4 East 28th Street. And I've heard, I don't know if it's true, that a new shelter is opening up on 41st and 10th Avenue.
Right. No, I do think Children's Rescue is within our zone, or that
That's
we.
expanding.
Is it expanding? Okay, because
They're
that's one
doing
of the only
massive
ones,
They're doing
that had
massive renovations and they have a lot of kids.
and that's the one that has a kitchen, right?
Yes.
Got it. Okay,
Yeah.
so these other shelters, and certainly not the hotels, none of them are equipped with kitchens?
None of the hotels have kitchen. Well, the other shelters, the kitchen varies. Some are tier 2, full apartments almost. And some are just 2-burner stove, a hot plate, things like that, a mini fridge. But nevertheless, when you're living in a hotel, these hotels do not have mini fridges. We
Got
have kids on special diets that need special kind of foods that you can't take care of because it's a problem. We have parents on medication, diabetic medication, or insulin, that need to be refrigerated. It's a problem.
So if I could ask you another set of questions now, instead of just logistics and demographics, it would be around needs. The last time we were all speaking, it was toiletries, cleaning supplies, and then school supplies and things like that. Where do you think, and laundry vouchers, et cetera, like
Always
where,
laundry vouchers.
yeah, where do you think the biggest needs are right now?
I got a donation. I don't know who did it. Somebody from the CEC gave me masks, children's masks. They were such a hit. They love them. So if you want to contribute more masks, I'll definitely take them. It
Right.
made the kids very happy. They were different than other masks. They love them. They always need cleaning supplies. They always need hygiene products,
Mhm.
laundry, anything that's clean. Where I'm trying to do coat drives kind of thing, because winter is coming. I've had a plethora of families from Honduras come into the hotels. I've been working on getting them into English as a second language. They've got all kinds of needs. I mean, if there were more, I don't know why we don't take care of this stuff within the confines of the shelter. If you've got 5, 6, 10 people that don't speak English that want to learn English, why not have a class? I think that would be wonderful, but I dream. There are remote days. I don't know what's going to happen with Eric Adams coming into office. And I know that he wants to push for a full school year and he believes in remote instruction. My families are very resistant. I find this very ironic, to getting the vaccine. I mean, right now, I have a grant that I'm running where if you are an adult living in shelter and you want to improve your life and go back to school to get a career instead of a $15 an hour job, I will pay your tuition and I will give you a laptop and I will mentor you. And I'm having a hard time recruiting people for this. And I think people are just so overwhelmed by what goes on and so depressed. They talk about, oh God, I'm going off. They talk about mental health services and here's a list. Try to get an appointment.
Right.
I think we should be servicing in the shelter, but I digress. Concrete needs always close. Christmas, you want to adopt a shelter for Christmas? That would be great.
Right. Okay.
Or school.
Right. Last year, we did two different things. I know Jocelyn Anker, who hasn't joined yet, but intended to, worked with a number of people. I don't think she was alone on that, on a toy drive for the various shelters. And then in the spring, we organized again those Amazon wish lists that we matched schools and sites, whether they be shelters or hotels, to match school populations, with them so that they could fulfill the needs there. So over the course of the coming month or so, as people are turning their attention to holidays, you think a toy drive and or a coat drive would be well received, yes?
Oh my, yes, absolutely, yes.
Okay. All right. What else do we need to know? What are the things that you want us to organize around, or where are there needs and gaps where we can get a bunch of intelligent, resourced people organized?
Okay, attendance is an issue, chronic absenteeism. And in going in and talking with families, finding out what's going on with them. They need social workers in the shelters. You need a higher level of care in the shelter.
Right.
You've got families that they have bad credit, so they can't get an apartment, or they're uneducated, so they can't get a job. And this is one by one individually. I can't tell you, there were a group of women. It's called the Sugar Plum Sled. Have you ever heard of them? Okay. If not for them, the last 18 months, they have been lifesavers. Families move out of shelter. They're supposed to get an allowance for beds. They don't always get the allowance. They would supply beds for all of my undocumented families, and they need everything. They have nothing. They have supplied whatever it is they need. People need food. They need pots and pans to cook in, things that we take for granted, we don't think about. And you don't know until you sit down and speak with the family and they tell you. So if you want to adopt a shelter and find out concrete needs, I'd be very happy to do it for you.
Right. So I think that's something that Tom and I were working on in the last incarnation, on especially those Amazon wish lists. When everything was all remote all the time, Tom raised an enormous amount of money for headsets because that was such a critical need.
That was so important.
And so now as things have shifted, we're just trying to figure out how to meet the need of the moment. And so those are, I think what's going to be helpful, because we'll probably do a drive of some sort, Iris, is figuring out which of the shelters are left, which of the shelter directors have now been shuffled around, because we built relationships with some of them who were more responsive than others, but some of them were really, really terrific and gave us good feedback on what their residents really needed. And there's a very good question that Daniela put in, that it was super helpful to learn from some of them around what the age of the residents were. And do you have any kind
of the ages? I can get that for you. I can't do it right now. I can absolutely get you the ages.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I think chat is disabled. I tried to write something in chat. Can you check? I wanted to ask you to write down the name of sugar or something. You said
Sugar Plum Sled.
Okay, can you put that in chat so that I can Google later? Thank you.
Iris, first, thank you so much for all the work that you're doing. I apologize. There's somebody here procrastinating on his homework. But I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that the need for social workers, right? And so I imagine that some of these students are concentrated in a few schools in our district. And I would love to know how many schools how many schools have this subpopulation of students, and then how is the connection with the social worker at the schools? Because my understanding is that now every single school in New York City has a social worker, and if there is any kind of work that we can do there to provide support to the families through the social workers from the schools.
All right, in District 2, there is one Bridging the Gap social worker that works exclusively with STH, that's at PS 51. Her day is so busy dealing with children who are so upset, so traumatized, that have meltdowns. The woman is so exhausted, and it's only November. She's had 3 child abuse cases in the month of October, and it's been very difficult. And she's great, but that's not somebody going into the shelter. That's not somebody working with the parent. That's somebody working with the child and having some contact with the parent. The DHS employs social workers, and a shelter director can call for a mental health evaluation or have somebody come in, but the parent is going to look at that suspiciously because it's coming from DHS, because it looks like they're a bad person. I mean, if you just sit down with a parent and you're not connected to DHS and you're not threatening them in any way because you're not going to take a benefit away from them, and you have them open up, you hear what goes on in their lives. And there are things you can fix, and there are things that you want to teach them how to fix. And there's not those services. I just see a repetition compulsion going on every day, and I don't see us working with these families as we should. There are 100 Bridging the Gap social workers in the Department of Education, and those are exclusively for STH, but they're all across the 5 boroughs. There are probably 4 or 5 social workers in District 5. There are 2 in District 1. And there's 1 in District 4. So that tells you in Manhattan, most of them are in the Bronx and Brooklyn. And they're working with children. They're not working with the families.
Right. Well, it's certainly something that we can try to elevate with, I mean, I know Gail Brewer was a big fan of social workers in every school, as Daniela has just noted, but, you know, trying to see if we can't get Mark Levine and other new city council people organized around this as a topic.
But they have to get the families involved.
Yeah.
When you're a social worker at the DOE, your focus is on the child and the school. And if you get the parent involved, you're going to have a child that's much more engaged.
Right.
And there's just not enough staff for that.
And are these 700 students concentrate in a few schools, or is a few students in multiple schools? I just want to have a sense of like
how it happens.
Exactly,
Right.
yes.
All right. So the word on the street is you need 60 STH children to get a social worker. Now, that's the rule. That doesn't mean that's the truth. But PS 51 must have about 70 kids. PS 33 has about 25 STH kids. PS 116 may have 30 STH kids. Now, there are community coordinators also that work within the schools, but that's about concrete services and working with kids. It's a school-based model. It's not a community model. It's not reaching out to the parents. And we just got a lot of money, you know, from McKinney-Vento funds. All of these funds. Oh, I'm seeing Ushma.
I don't know. I've not heard of this. Please do tell.
We got a lot of money, and we have to decide what to do with the money. We got grant money over the next 3 years. And we're right, but let's see what we do with that money.
When you mean we, you mean DOE specifically, or
not me, students in temporary housing, my division.
No, but who is the decision making? So you know we can advocate for all the things that you're saying.
If you ever repeat that I said this to you, okay.
It's being recorded.
Be careful, Iris.
Sorry to
No, we are having town hall meetings about what to do with these funds, what kind of programming we want to do. Do we want to do after school? You know, here's the problem with the hotels. There's no room to put a program in the hotel. If your child is going to school in the Bronx and lives in a Manhattan hotel, and you're lucky enough to get a bus, you're not staying for after school because you'll miss your bus. There are no buses in the late afternoon. And after school programs are very limited in District 2. They take in a certain circumscribed amount of kids. It's not for everybody. And I think after school is really important. Anything to get a family out of shelter, to get a child out of shelter for as long as possible during the day is important.
I had a question about vaccine outreach to those families, given what you said before around how many of them are quite reluctant, and with the recent approval of age 5 to 11, it's now essentially age 5 and up. How responsive do you think these communities would be to further vaccine outreach and education, bringing
I
it
don't.
to them?
Truth, I don't
No,
think
be
so.
honest with me, because
I don't
let's
think
not
so.
waste time.
I mean,
Yeah.
with my grant, I sit down with an adult and say, all right, you want to go back to school? You want to go to Medgar Evers? Well, if you go to CUNY right now, you have to be vaccinated, and they refuse to be vaccinated, and they want to do online studying. But eventually they're going to have to get vaccinated because they're going to have to get a job. Some of the shelter directors are anti-vaxxers. I'm going to tell you all kinds of horrible things. When there's an outbreak at a school, a COVID outbreak in a classroom, children are sent home for 10 days, but there's no communication between the school and the shelter. So unless the parent discloses that information, they don't know. And if the kid was exposed and maybe walking around with COVID, it goes on and on and on. So there's a lack of communication around that.
Got it.
I had staff that didn't want to be vaccinated. We have lost family assistants working in shelters because they refuse to be vaccinated. And they are allowed to stay and collect health insurance for the next year, but they can't come to work. That I was deployed in a school for 2 weeks because we lost thousands of people.
Right. Okay. Understood and appreciated. That is something that I spend a lot of time doing, actually, is vaccine outreach. Pamela had me come up and talk to her cohort before. She's also asking, who is the equivalent to you for District 5? Do you happen to know the name of the person?
Rakia, I'll put it in the chat.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
So that Pamela can get in touch.
If you're doing vaccine outreach, maybe you could do a PR campaign in the shelters for the 5 to 12 set, because this is a new population. I don't know what's going to happen. If we all got vaccinated, we could all take off our masks. That would be great. I think that that's a great idea. It's not been tried. I mean, there are adults that say, I'm never going to do it, but maybe they feel differently about the children.
And it's also, it's the sort of thing that thanks, Pamela, just my personal PR campaign. But like, even if it's for like the shelter directors, and your colleagues, to start to give them the information that they can start to pass on, and, to talk to some of your colleagues, because, every newly informed person can be a node of reference and referral to other people. Like, I feel like at this point, Pamela's probably heard me give that presentation twice. She could probably start to do it on her own to convince other people, and making those resources available to people. So it's something for us to think about and keep moving forward, because as you say, and I see Daniela also shaking her head or nodding her head, that like, the more people vaccinated, the less we have to use masks, and then the less it's going to spread. So that might be an additional incentive for some people.
We formed a relationship with a company out of Hudson Yards, and they are supplying I got the permission from DHS, if it comes in a plastic bin, of sending home non-perishable foods every Friday for the weekend for the next few months, to see how that goes. And so there'll be a change to the routine of the foods that they're eating. There'll be snacks. It's a nice thing to do. So that's going out to PS 33, that's going out to 51 and 111. Those are the 3 schools. You had to be close to the Hudson Yards to participate.
Right. So that's an excellent segue to one of the other things that's on our agenda to talk about, which is pandemic EBT. And I know when you and I had a conversation on the phone, one of the things that I would love for us to figure out how we could make it work is how to use wish lists, like Amazon wish lists, so that we can use for those who are in the position to be able to donate the money that they get from the pandemic EBT without using the money ourselves and then writing a check or doing a different thing, but to just be able to directly use that money to fulfill Amazon wish lists. So if this group in the Hudson Yards, or if PS33 or 151 or any of them would accept other donations, it's so easy. So I think I was telling you, Sloan Kettering has a food pantry for those who are food insecure but are also cancer patients, and to give them high caloric, appropriate kinds of foods that are nutritional for cancer patients and their families. So they have set up an Amazon Smile where you can then just use your EBT card to purchase the things on there, and they get shipped to the food pantry at MSK. So, I mean, I've spent now $2,700 on the food pantry with my 3 cards, but, you know, everything keeps getting topped up, although this might be one of the last times that this happens, given that everybody's, you know, in person more frequently now. But for those people who haven't yet spent all of their money off of their EBT cards, to be able to supply food, like the non-perishable foods and things like that, to shelter residents would be terrific.
Well, I can tell you right now that the Families and Children's Rescue Fund, and there's at least 100 families, have cooking facilities and could really use real, honest to God food.
Right.
Okay. If the new shelter opens up on 41st Street, that's going to hold 150 families. There's some permanently housed people there, and they're working out the particulars. And I think it's Wedco that may be, I think that's the vendor. They're going to have cooking facilities with the hotels. You know, you can't give them food that can go bad because they're worried about vermin and bugs.
Right. But perhaps what we can do is I'll over email, I'll reconfirm with you the name of the shelter director from Children's Rescue Fund.
Okay.
And we can potentially set up some kind of an Amazon wish list, like a never ending, like things like, you know, granola bars and, you know, cans of tuna and things like that, that we
They'll
can set
take
up.
anything. They would
Such
be
that,
thrilled.
yeah, such that we could, you know, set up an Amazon wish list for them to be able to, for people to use their EBT cards and, you know, on Amazon to fulfill that kind of a need would be really terrific.
Okay.
All right. So I'll work on that with you afterwards.
Okay.
There was a really great question that Faiza asked in the chat. When it comes to like a coat drive or clothing drive, should the clothing all be new, or are there donations of used clothing that are accepted and used coats?
Okay. I'm just writing an email, schools.nyc.gov. I'm sorry. I just wanted to give her the email address. Okay. I am always of the mind that when you're dealing with families living in temporary housing, you should always give new. Otherwise, it feels like handouts. So there are plenty of people that will take donated coats. I'm very firm on this. That's my own subjective opinion.
Okay. Well, when it comes to like a Christmas/winter, you know, end of the year holiday kind of a drive, we can see about setting up these Amazon wish lists with.
Well, here's something you can
lower
do.
priced. Yeah.
If you want to do this, and it's just an idea for the families that are moving into permanent housing, if you want to do anything around helping them, imagine moving into an apartment and you get beds and blankets and pillowcases and sheets, and that's it.
I think, Iris, the issue there, or has been for the past, is identifying those people and figuring out how to advantage them with their, you know, in the best possible way, like, and not doing it on a bespoke one by one kind of a.
I understand.
Yeah.
With me, it's one by one.
I think for the scale that we're looking at in terms of a school community helping somebody, or I think it has worked best to match like a school and a shelter and meet the needs of that shelter and a population there that seems to resonate the most with D2 schools and families, just based on the last, you know, year and a half experience.
I think, or if there is an organization like you mentioned the Sugar Plums Lab. If it is providing this service, then we can definitely, I think then we can definitely, provide support for the organization to provide that. One last question. We talked a lot about like their immediate needs and things that, we can do kind of as volunteers, but we talk a little bit about policy in terms of, the lack of social workers for bridging the gap. This is my first time attending one of these years, but I would love for us to have more conversations about like the policy and how the CEC can, maybe even pass resolutions in support of the policy changes that are needed to really be able to better serve these students.
Yeah.
I hear you, Daniela. I think for the last 2 years, people like Tom and I and Shino, when she was on the council, we ended up focusing most of our efforts on dollars and cents rather than policy, because what we found was that things were so Byzantine in terms of our ability to navigate them in any way that Iris was already doing. I spent a lot of time with like Corey Johnson's office and Gail Brewer's office trying to figure out how to use EBT money, the pandemic EBT money, to help students in shelters, and it was impossible. It was damn near impossible because the food has to be so regulated and provided by only a few vendors, and how to get it to them, and they can't have food in their rooms and the vermin and all of that. So we ended up focusing in different ways, but I do think that Daniela has a good point. Like if there's advocacy work that you want to suggest to us, where we can signal to our elected officials, this might be one of very few topics around which I think the entirety of CEC would probably vote unanimously around trying to help a certain subset of D2 students.
Your population may be decimated in January, though.
Why do you say that?
Because DHS could say, we're closing everything December 31st. Everybody's moving. And that's the end of the population. And that would leave Children's Rescue Fund in District 2, which is a freestanding shelter. I'm wondering if they're waiting for this new shelter to open so that they can move the families from the hotels. Although, we must have, I guess, 350, 400 families. They won't all fit there, but that's more reasonable. So I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I have staff that work. A hotel closes down, the staff loses their job. Where do they go? What do they do? And where are these families going? And then we have to go find them. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't mean to sound so ambiguous, but I've been told everything's closing the end of October. Everything's closing the end of November. And now I'm shooting for December. So know that you may be advocating and then there may not be a population if indeed they decide, let's move everybody out.
Hear you.
But the children, as you said, would most likely continue at D2 schools because.
Correct.
So
there'll be another shelters. So then you would be working with the schools instead of the shelters, correct?
Right. Right. Jennifer, you put something in the chat. Do you want to unmute and just ask what your question is? If you're able.
Oh. Wow, you would like a parent to, do you want me to get a parent and they could talk about their experience? I could certainly look for someone.
Well, I guess I was thinking that this meeting was like specifically to work, but would be also with parents who are in the shelter attending the meeting. So I'm just a little thrown that it's not that.
I'm sorry.
I'm just wondering if that is possible, or is it?
It's absolutely possible. If you want me to bring a parent, I will bring a parent. What kind of parent would you like?
Well, it's not what do I want.
No, I mean, we have families that are incredibly frustrated. We have families that are very hopeful. We have lots of different families.
Right.
I would bring an articulate parent that wants to say what they want to say. I didn't know you wanted parents.
I think Jennifer brings up an excellent point. I mean, it's a lot of us kind of guessing and shouting into the void of what we think they want, and it's probably very smart to engage with the families
That's right.
directly as opposed to guessing at it. Jennifer, it's not for lack of want or that we haven't invited. We send all of these notices. We understand that everybody is busy and that these tend to be both at dinner time and bedtime for a lot of parents. And so asking for whoever wants to be engaged. Our focus over the last year and a half has been around supplies as well as a certain amount of tutoring that we could try and partner with people to engage on. But that doesn't mean that the purview can't change over the course of the next year. It's a small group of engaged parents, which fantastic, So Iris, perhaps for the next meeting that we have, that would be a thing for us to strive towards, is making sure that we're engaging with some of the parents that are within this group that are willing to come and talk to us about where they see deficiencies and how we could potentially ever help.
Okay.
Paved with good intentions, right? But let's make sure that
Roadmap.
we're hitting the bullseye on the target and not just hitting the bullseye on exactly the wrong target. So, okay. Any other questions for Iris? Maybe from Daniela's son? Hi, Daniela's son.
Do you have any questions? He
Excellent.
wants help with his homework, so I need to jump, but
All right.
thank you so much. Thank you. This was very informative and I look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining, Daniela. Okay. Tom, any other thoughts or questions or ideas here?
No, I mean, as far as encouraging, parents from the shelters to come, I mean, it's not as if they need to be a guest speaker. As many as, want to come are welcome to come. We're here to advocate for them and their children. So they don't need to feel like they're on display. They're, part of the collaboration, and welcome to all community education council meetings as well. Also, if they're having issues, I mean, I know I'm no longer on the board, and I'm volunteering other people, which feels good. But, they have peer liaisons on the community education council for each school. So if they're having particular issues with the school, I mean, it may be a good idea to reach out to the person who's a peer liaison on the board.
Yeah.
And I'm a pain in the butt, so I'm happy to reach out to any individual school principal on behalf of, a parent or a student need as well.
I would phrase that differently, Tom, but you're an advocate and you are tenacious and here to advocate on behalf of parents and their kids.
I'm also an attorney, so I go through the rules and regulations freely. Excellent.
So I think we've kind of interwoven in here several of the other things that were on the agenda. The first one was you, Iris, and please feel free to interrupt if you think there's anything else that we missed or something that we should have asked that you want us to know or think about. But then it was just the recap on pandemic EBT. Did a colleague of mine told me they just recently got the second bolus of funds on their cards. So I don't know, I had spent down by and large mines on food pantries, so I hadn't checked on them recently. Has anyone used theirs? No. All right. But I think it would be an excellent idea and choice. I think that's one of my favorite ideas to come out from tonight, Iris, is to work with you to contact the person from Children's Rescue Fund about setting up a wish list and then circulating that amongst our school community so that people could use their pandemic EBT cards if they haven't used them up already to directly supply food and non-perishables to that shelter.
Related to that, Ushma, I'm wondering about the child tax credit money, like that some families probably don't really need it the same way that others do, and if that would be possible to also be spreading around.
Yeah. It's a terrific idea. I saw an article recently about how people could file for getting like $50 a month as opposed to getting it as a bolus. We had, if I'm honest, Jennifer, modest returns on efforts into asking people to use their EBT and then write a check to different things. I know several people did through direct lobbying. I think one of the things that we just have kept looking for was a way for people to just use that EBT money directly so that there had to be no other transaction. So the child tax credit money might be a little bit more complicated in that regard, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't look or shouldn't try. Right. I forgot I was planning to prepare a primer because I still think that there's people out there who haven't gotten replacement cards if they threw out their original one or never got a card. So I was going to put that together in terms of how to organize to get that money, but I'll try and do that and move forward with it. The next thing on our agenda was organizing around outreach and wish lists and shelter supplies. So I really liked your thought, Iris, that perhaps if we are going to do something over the coming months, that it revolve around coats, hats, mittens for kids, as well as some cleaning supplies, and then toys and gifts around the holidays.
How about duffel bags?
Duffel bags as
No,
well.
families move from shelter to shelter.
Right.
They move in big black garbage bags.
Mm-hmm.
It would be really nice if they had something sturdy to carry their belongings in. It's just a thought.
Sure. So one thing the D2 was able to do at the end of last year was use our extra budget. I know you and I had spoken about this on two different things: graphing calculators for 8th and 9th graders and backpacks. So we got like really nice backpacks, but I know that there's Project Backpack as well that is out there doing that too. So the idea of larger duffel bags is a good one. So those kind of 3 or 4 things that we could put onto wish lists for these shelters that are congregated now of 700 to 750 people in 9 places might be an easier lift than the one that we were doing before with 14 to 15 shelters.
That's 700 kids. That's
700 kids, yeah. 700 kids across 9 places, as opposed to before.
Correct.
It was 1,600 kids across 14 places, right?
Correct.
Yeah. So, okay. But I think that we never, ever had a full wish list. Everything got emptied. And I recall in the spring, there were a few parents who reached out to me saying, one of my kids' schools is doing this. Why haven't you reached out to my other kid's school to do it? So there's a lot of really generous people in D2 that I'm eager to get back to work with on that. All right. So then with that, so I'm going to call on whoever wants to help organizing some of this Amazon wish list stuff, because it's a bit of organizing and doing, and it takes some time and effort to do. Jocelyn Anchor was an angel last year or over the last year and a half. And so I will be asking her if she's willing to step into the breach again, but we can always use additional hands for anybody that's willing. So, does anybody have anything else that they would like to bring up on this topic? Then with that, thank you all for attending, being engaged, giving us a little bit of your time. Thank you, Iris, for what you do every day and how you're helping these families. It's great to have such a forceful and powerful ally to that group of people who really need your help.
Sorry, I was running to get the phone. I just wanted to ask Iris. Iris, you must have heard of Room to Grow and Pajama program, right?
I use comfort cases out of Pennsylvania.
Okay.
What does yours do? And then let's compare.
Okay, so Room to Grow and Pajama Program are organizations that I work with. I work with an organization called Muslim Volunteers for New York, and every year we have a drive for them. And the beneficiaries of the drive are children who live in shelters, and we provide them with clean clothes, brand new clothes, and books to read, so that every child has a clean pair of pajamas and a book to read at night. And I know Room to Grow does other stuff also. So if I have your email,
Please, yes,
could I
write
put you
me an email.
yeah.
Comfort Keepers gives you a backpack with flannel pajamas and a blanket and a book and a little hygiene kit. And I got them for most of the shelters last year, every kid, because it was like a nice thing to sleep in, really nice stuff. But this, I want to know more about.
Can you share your email on the chat? I don't see it on the chat, so I could just email you directly, and I'll put you in touch.
Thank you so much.
Not at all. I want to connect you to people who can help. So yeah, if you put your email, I'll just reach out to you and we can hopefully connect you with them. Thank you.
I participated in this soapbox thing in Times Square last year. I brought my staff and we made hygiene kits and we delivered them to 3 or 4 shelters. It was this 20-foot bottle in Times Square.
Right.
So he said to me, for every bottle of soap he sells is a bottle that he donates.
Awesome.
So I just wrote to him 2 days ago and said, remember your promise? You said you'd help me out this year. So now we're negotiating for that. But clothes for kids, God, that would be great.
No, absolutely. And then we also have, we also partner with another organization called Housing Plus, and that serves a slightly different population. It's recently incarcerated women, and we do semi-annual hygiene product drives for them. So I could see if, we could make D2 families who live in temporary housing also beneficiaries, but I'll reach out to you separately. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
No, not at all. Thank you for everything you do.
Okay.
Indeed, Faiza, thank you. That's super generous. And
Yes.
we really appreciate you using your connections here.
Absolutely. Anything to help D2 families. All right. I'm just going to switch my video off. My kids are screaming.
Okay.
Understood. All right. Then with that, if anybody has anything else they want to add. All right, we tend to have these every 2 months, so I'll probably call another meeting in January, but just because you see us inactive doesn't mean that we won't be working behind the scenes. So for anyone who does want to get involved on an organizing kind of an effort, please feel free to be in touch. I will put my name in the chat as well. Uneil at Uneil at CECD2.net. Please feel free to get in touch with me if you would like to be involved. Otherwise, please reach out via our Twitter feed, which I handle, which is at CEC District 2, or my personal Twitter, which is at Ushma Neal. So that's for anybody who's listening to the recording or the live stream. Please feel free to get in touch. This is a topic about which I feel quite passionately. It's, I think, the best thing that I do for CEC. So I'm quite pleased to be involved in this effort.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good
Good
night.
night.
Thanks for joining us.